Happy New Year and welcome to our Egypt Museum. My name is Maggie Kesaria, and we will begin a new dynamic year this year with many programs. We do have flyers outside at the entrance for our upcoming events. So this is the first of the few events that we will be having this year. Last year we had 28 events. I think we broke the score. So this year we're going to slow down a bit so that our patrons will come as they can. Today's event is something very unusual. I met through SOFI KHACHMANYAN, who's our speaker, introduced me years ago to a lady, Timurian, who is a descendant of the Telfeyan family. And then our friendship began with SOFI. She's been very helpful to the museum through her expertise in her field. And now, this was at the time that she introduces one of her papers that she has prepared about the Telfeyan family. I have to tell you, for the last 1 month, I visited Mrs. Nazari El-Masyan, who is the great-granddaughter, and I thought that I was walking into Kesaria in the 1800s. The entire house is full of rugs, the beauty of the people and their history. So she passed down a lot of the pictures, the story. I was inundated with information, who's who. So I was amazed the craftsmanship and the business mind that these people had during that time. So just a brief background about SOFI. She began her career in textile decorating and embroidery arts at Art Technical College in Yerevan, Armenia. Shortly after her graduation, she earned the title Master Folk Artist of Embroidery Arts and participated in a variety of exhibitions in Armenia as well as in Russia. After moving to the United States in 1988, she continued her education in fashion design and costume making, earning her bachelor's and master's degrees from California State University, Los Angeles. Her designs have been showcased at various venues in Los Angeles and New York. She's received an award for Best Costume Design. Currently, she's working on her doctoral dissertation at the Institute of Arts, Pre-Academy of Science of Armenia, Yerevan. The topic of her research is the symbology of the vestments of the Catholicos and their presentation in Armenian medieval manuscript painting. We do have a small reception afterwards, so please, afterwards, let's all go downstairs and spend quality time with SOFI. SOFI?
Good afternoon, everybody. As you can see from the title, I'm going to speak about silk rugs of Telfeyan collection from Kesaria today. I have been working on this collection. Actually, there are two Kesarian families in Los Angeles who hold all their belongings from Kesaria. They smuggled them from Turkey, and these families are still hanging to those pieces. We have done a few exhibits around Los Angeles, and we did lots of exhibits and read lectures, presenting them to the American public. And then this rug that is going to be presented in my talk was the reason why I was interested in arch design rugs and actually came into researching this. So, and that story is like almost like 2 decades, and one of the families, older ladies, says that Telfeyan family kind of adopted me, and I became like sisters with them because I know so much about their family, and I'm so interested in it. It's a fascinating story. Okay, so let's start our presentation. Now, this is the map of the Anatolia, and Kayseri is right here with its regions. Pretty much these rugs that are going to be presented today will be from that region. Kesaria, under the Turkish domination, was one of the important trade and cultural centers of Anatolia in the second half of the 19th century. There was almost 20,000 Armenians in this multicultural city, almost like 40% or half of the population. And after genocide, there was only 2,000 Armenians left in there. Despite the multicultural influences, it retained its own unique artistic essence and cultural environment. Kesarian Armenians, being flexible and clever businessmen, had a distinctive position in the multicultural society and had a stable position in the market. Therefore, as Ashak Alboyajan says, kept all trade as well as arts and crafts in their hands. At the end of the 19th century, carpet weaving production in Kesaria was expedited. And within only 7 or 10 years, almost every middle class or poor family in Kesaria had a loom. They were weaving rugs. Until 1897-98, the cost of the one wool rug was like about 2 golds, Turkish gold. Coins and silk rugs were almost 15 to 20 gold coins. That was a lot of money for a rug. Regarding the color of the design of these carpets produced in Kesaria during that time, Alboyajan wrote, earlier the rug weavers were mostly using dark colors, especially navy blue, which was called chivit. But later on, they started mostly using lighter and cold colors, and the blue was not used anymore. Because of this change, carpets from Kesaria were more appreciated by the European customer. The author then continues that the first carpet design influences were inspired by old carpets from Khorasan, Dagestan, Kyotes, Kula, Ladik, and some other designs. There was a scarcity of newly designed carpet images, he says. At that time, pretty much they were using older designs and images. This observation by Alboyajan gives a reason to assume that despite various cultural influences in that area, created by the significant growth in the carpet production, centuries-old cultural tradition in carpet design in the Kesaria region were stable and continuous. That's what one would think. Now, one of the families that actually really jumped into this venture was the Telfeyan family. As you can see in the picture, the person in the middle, that's Moses Telfeyan. He was a very clever business person, and his father, Sarkis Telfeyan, was in silk trade, meaning silk fibers. They were bringing silk fibers from different countries and were selling in Istanbul and Eastern Europe. But soon that changed and they started weaving rugs. The Telfeyan family was one of the well-known large business entrepreneurs in Kesaria, occupied in silk fiber, as I said, until short after the second half of the century, 19th century. Since the silk fiber prices dropped dramatically at that time due to Chinese silk market, they opened up their warehouses, I think, and that's why the prices went down. And Kayseri, clever businessman, actually would not just be on hold. They jumped into another business venture, which was making jejims. Actually, Moses Telfeyan was the first guy who started making jejims. And after jejim, they started doing rugs. Before I change the slide, I would like to show you a couple of the children whose rugs that I'm going to talk about. This young man here is his only son. His name was Sarkis, and this is Agapi. Actually, she was the mastermind of the business. She was coming up with designs and even teaching weavers how to weave the rugs. Here you have Victoria Telfeyan. We're going to talk about her rug, and the rug that I mentioned about that was Victoria's. And this is her younger sister, Manik. And actually, these two girls' belongings are the ones that we have from the Moses' side of the family. Here I have some examples of the jejims that Moses was making in his factory at the very beginning. And then that changed into rugs because jejims were not most probably selling that much. Here also I have Manik and Victoria's picture again. Actually, after they escaped from Kesaria in 1896, Victoria and Manik were the only ones that were not married yet. And Moses actually died in Istanbul, and these two girls stayed with Agapi alone, with their mother. And eventually in the future, Victoria's son got married with Manik's daughter. Shahine that I'm going to present to you, that was an unusual marriage between, two very close cousins. But the reason was that done that way is because Victoria passed away very early, and Manik wanted to take care of her son and keep the wealth in the family. That's why they did it. And they didn't get married in an Armenian church, but in the Italian church or something. Now, and Manik's, one of the Manik's daughter is the keeper of the collection. And you can see this little girl here. Her name is Shahine. I was expecting this side of the descendants of this woman be here. They're not here yet. Most probably they will come in. I don't know. So Shahine, this is Manik already, and this is Shahine that kept both of the sisters' textiles and clothing, and it's an amazing collection that it just like amazes me how they hang on to those. Now, the family history of Moses Telfeyan attracted a group of American specialists' attention at the end of the 90s. At that time, Moses' granddaughter Vicky and Tina found bochas from their mother and grandmother's Shahine Dilsizian's house and closets in Whitestone, New York. Shahine saved them for decades. In those bundles, among clothing, embroidered articles, and family heirlooms. From Kesaria and Istanbul, they had found silk carpet that the mother of the family, Agapi, Moses' wife, gave it to her daughter Victoria as a wedding gift. This carpet, which is this carpet that we're talking about. This carpet has one-sided design with a cone-shaped arch, as you can see, and supported with two columns, and in the yellow background. It has a gate of paradise design decorated with small floral motifs like Ladik carpets. According to the stories kept in the family, this rug was made in Moses Telfeyan's factory before 1896, before the family actually left Kesaria. The second silk rug, again with an arch design, belonged to, according to Vicky Demirci, which is granddaughter of Moses Telfeyan's granddaughter, belonged to Moses' son Sarkis, as I said. Sarkis gave the rug to his firstborn daughter, Clara, again for some sort of important occasion. Later on, Clara gave it to Victoria. Actually, this second Victoria is the great-granddaughter of that first Victoria that I showed the picture of. Again, it's a gate of paradise rug. Now this one, in contrast with Victoria's rug, has a red background, and design motifs are very detailed, and it's kind of like a complex design, has a complex design. Now the third rug that we're going to talk about, in again similar design, was discovered in photos in second family of Telfeyan's family. Actually, this family is a descendant of Moses' brother Karapet. She is 92 years old. I was also expecting her to see today here. She's a very energetic woman in that age. That was Maggie was talking about when we visited her house. She's the keeper now. She kept everything. So Naziri El-Masyan's family kept everything that was coming from that side, and they ended up in New York. Actually, but this guy in the middle is Setrak Timurian. That was Karapet's son-in-law. He is Setrak Timurian with his sons. Actually, this is an unusual way of talking about rug. This attracted my attention because this rug was hung in a very honorable place in his office, New York office. This is his New York office with telephone and everything, you can see. This is most probably 1910, and he got photographed with his sons, Onig and Anarik, who were his business partners at the time. The fourth rug, I noticed this rug in the Eskişehir Museum here, and when I was working on this research, And it is also in the same design style. Has an arch design, and then it doesn't belong to Telfeyan family, obviously, but I saw that this has something to do with the rugs in question. So I asked Maggie to take photograph the rug and kind of study this rug also. This rug belonged to Luther Eskician, and it was given to him from an Armenian American woman to the collector. According to the woman's statement, this rug was present to her from her parents on the occasion of her graduation from the high school. Despite the obvious differences, there are substantial design and color similarities between this rug and the rugs mentioned above. Therefore, it was included in this research to have enough samples for comparison. The research had comparison of decorative design, color combination, symbolism, and the use of materials allows us to draw a conclusion about the beginning and development of this tradition in the Gate of Paradise, or so-called Ladik rugs, in Kesaria's Armenian cultural environment. Then we are going to look at the development of the tradition into the 20th century. Historical comparison methods were used to compare these rugs to each other, as well as to well-known samples or published rugs from 16th century. The aim is to find out if the decorative traditions extant in the Armenian rug-making culture in Kesaria during the second half of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th centuries, if this culture, actually this tradition, presents individual, unique cultural phenomena in Kesarian region. First of all, we have to mention that one-sided arch-form design rugs in the West at the end of the 19th century until now, called Oriental or Turkish prayer rugs. In the internet site of New York Metropolitan Museum, there were similar rugs that were described as Turkish prayer rugs. And Encyclopedia Britannica also, and other commercial sites, informed that the Turkish rugs are called Ladik because they were made in Ladokia or Konya during the 18th and 19th centuries. Ladik rugs were usually have pointed arches with columns or without them, in Turkish called mehrab, and below the mehrab, these rugs also have tulips, and the entire design is surrounded with large frame full of twisted decorations. Armenians from Kesaria currently call them prayer rugs. And when I was the first time called to Cafe Dele for the photo shoot, and when I saw the rugs, I was kind of like, I was amazed, because I also knew that it looks like a Turkish prayer rug, but then why Kesarian people actually kept them and gave to their children for very important milestones in their lives. And that was really amazing. And the rug was very expensive also. To clarify the origin, stylistic changes, and development of arch-shaped rug designs until the beginning of the 20th century, we need to observe the cultural structural connection with the design known in the Armenian medieval manuscript painting, architecture, khachkars, or goldsmith art book covers. During the 9th to 13th centuries, along the Vincar in Sebastia, Kesaria also was an important rug-making center in Cappadocia. According to Marco Polo's famous witness account, in the 13th century, in Kesaria and surrounding cities and villages, the world's best and most beautiful carpets were made, as lovely as appealing, silken garments as well, richly woven with gold, unsurpassed and more splendorous in color than anywhere else in the world. Silks in all colors are also produced there. Based on this and other foreign accounts, Manya Ghazarian did some research about, profound research about rugs, Armenian rugs, especially in Seljuk invasion times, which is 11th century, and long before that, she says that in Sebastia, Konya, and Kesaria, regions, the production of rugs and fine textiles were blooming mainly in the hands of Greeks and Armenians. According to Kesaria, among ethnic groups in the region of Asia Minor, during the Middle Ages, only Armenians had established rug making traditions, like stable traditions. Those designs expressed stable tradition and converged certain ideological and artistic symbols, as well as they had specific design tradition of middle fields of rugs and frame around them. Then she continues, those design specifications are not characteristics to Islamic nations' decorative characteristics. Moreover, Islamic tradition actually rejected Christian tradition of making carpets. That's why Christian rugs are separated from Islamic rug designs. Some researchers, like prominent researchers like Wolfgang Gonsorn, believe that the rugs with one-sided arch design are produced by Christians. It is necessary to mention that Armenians had their own tradition of using prayer rugs from earlier times. There is a witness account that in west wing of the Holy Grigor Illuminated Church in Kesaria, on the wooden floor, there were numbered rectangular sections where every worshipper prayed kneeling on a prayer rug. It is not clearly clear if that was borrowed from Islamic culture or that was really the culture of Armenian tradition, church tradition. But one thing is clear, that the church floors in Armenian churches were covered with rugs. But in these sections, most probably every donor or contributor of the church had their specific number of the section where they put their rugs and kneeled and prayed on those. And according to Gonsorn, Muslim prayer rugs as such appeared only in the 19th century. So they didn't have that kind of culture. It is also known from the stories kept in the Telfeyan family that Turkish customers ordering their prayer rugs simply would come and select the existing decorations, whatever that was that they liked, and they simply ordered, instead of red background, green background. That was the symbol of Muhammad. And Tina kind of notes, because that's coming, actually, Tina, can you stand up for a second? She's Moses Telfeyan's great-great-granddaughter. Face them. Thank you. Now she's the keeper. That's why we have to applaud her. She's the keeper of Moses Telfeyan's side of the family stuff. Let's go back in the history and observe the developments of arch designs in Mediterranean region. Gonsorn states that the tradition of arch carpets had their own beginnings in Mesopotamia, where the arch symbolized spiritual and secular power and influence. Subsequently, the arch decoration became the certain covering of the biblical Holy of Holies as the main decorating design. In the Byzantine interpretation of the artful forms, it was expressed also through the empty arches, where they identified the holy space and symbolized God's might and power. In the Quran it says, Allah is the light of heavens and the earth. The example of his light is like a niche within which a lamp. The lamp is within glass, and the glass as if it were pearly white star lit from the olive oil, blessed olive oil. So most probably this is the main reason why this particular design smoothly was adopted by Muslim culture, and the fact that there are many parallels between Christian and Islamic symbology, especially in our carpet design. In Phrygian gravestones, however, an arch symbolized an entrance towards eternity, one continuous tradition which found its expressive interpretation on the Armenian cross stones, on church facades, window arch-shaped structures, as well as in miniature painting, where it appears as an arch of tomb leading to eternity or paradise. Curtains have been used in Palestine, Consort says, or as mentioned above in the Jewish cult as Torah shrine curtains covering the Holy of Holies. But it is unique to Armenian culture in its own, and it has its own interpretation of, of the arch. As for the structural design, according to Gonsorn's characterization, from the viewer's point, arches can be perceived as positive or negative images. When viewed as positive image, try to look at the arches, for instance, as a positive image. You will see an architectural structure. For instance, here the entrance facade of Arch of Triumph leading to the paradise. The arch as a negative image, when you look just a negative image of the arch, that will okay, so as a positive image, it is architectural structure, and it's like an entrance, like a door. When you look at the negative image, it will be perceived as an entrance or passage. In both instances, the aim is the same: paradise, entrance to the paradise. The artistic tradition of arches and arch decoration in Armenian culture has centuries-old history and presented stable and continuous tradition in Armenian art, whereas the Muslim culture was taking its baby steps yet in the 17th century. In the process of adapting the monotheist traditions, Islam was leading on the dogmatic and symbolic traditions of Jewish and Christian religious systems. For instance, as was mentioned above, the arch from the symbol of the sky, or is the entrance to the paradise. The message symbol of the arch-shaped rugs, summarized by Gansorn, is the church is the way to eternal life and paradise also. The arch-shaped church entrance that symbolizes the victory of belief towards God is the only way for the believer to find and receive God's mercy on the last day of the judgment. As mentioned above, the tradition of rock design decoration in Kesaria had its own beginning in the Middle Ages, where it had the structure of cone-shaped triple arch, as you can see in this case, where you can see that there is a church entrance type of motif, and then the apostle sits right in front of the church, actually. And you can see the connection between these two designs, one in manuscript painting, one in rug decoration. You can see the connection. Actually, this rug, the yellow rug, is 15th century rug. The message symbol of the arch-shaped rugs, okay, so we said that it was like a gate to the paradise. As mentioned above, the tradition of rock design decoration in Kesaria had its own beginnings in the Middle Ages, where it had the structure of a cone-shaped triple arch as a form of the church with triple aisles, supported on two columns, presenting the grace of God on the day of the judgment, as I mentioned, sometimes used as curtains for Holy of Holies. Such designs are seen in some miniature paintings from Vaspuragan school tradition. And this one image that I put right there, that's a 13th century Vaspuragan painting from a Vaspuragan manuscript. On some examples of old rugs, the triple arch field on the top usually was decorated with line of lilies. As you can see, it's visible in here. Sometimes that design will be distinctive, like lily designs. And that will be, most of the time, lilies will be concealed in rectangular frame. That was symbol of the Virgin Mary. The entire field is surrounded with primary large frame filled with cross-based cartouches, like that. So that was like a traditional design. So the arch the columns, the rectangular shape with flowers, wide or narrow, and then those flowers, cross-shaped flowers around the arch field above. The entire field is surrounded with primary large frame filled with cross-based cartouches, and the large frame had neighboring secondary or tertiary designs, narrower frames with similar designs. Later on, in 17th and 18th centuries, triple arch designs, two columns, little by little lost their meanings and importance. But before we go any further to see those rugs, I'm presenting this rug that most probably is made for a Muslim customer, because the middle arch field is filled with green, which was the symbol of Muhammad. And you can see that these two columns are distinctively important, and they have weight-carrying meaning for this design. Now, later during the 17th and 18th centuries, triple arch designs, two columns, are losing their importance. Now, you can see that little by little, these rugs kind of like change the columns. This one is mentioned that it has a Greek influence bed called Gorsi carpet, a very, very important piece that is missing nowadays. And has Armenian letters on it saying that this was for Church of Ripsime to cover the Holy of Holies. And here you can see that the columns are becoming very narrow and small, and they're pushed towards the sides, and which expands the middle field is getting wider and larger, and then eventually they disappear. This was seen on some rugs even in 16th centuries. Actually, this process did not necessarily finish completely in the 18th century, but in some rug designs you can see that this type of designs do not have the columns anymore. But if generally we talk about how the design developed, first it was like two columns like I mentioned, and then later on columns became unimportant and disappeared. So then they came up with this kind of design. Let's observe our rugs in question based on this observation and see what we get, what we learn about the rugs that we are observing. At first glance, the bigger rug is the Sarkis's rug, the red one, as I mentioned before, in which natural-looking floral decorations are very important and dominant. In this case, Victoria's rug is following this design. Timurian's rug, in terms of decorative frames, is similar to Eskijan's, simpler. And Eskijan is the most simpler rug in these designs. Actually, like you can see that the whole entire field is kind of occupied, but the designs are pretty much, like they're very large, they're not very narrow, and the frames are gone too. And secondary frames are completely eliminated on this rug. And it is visible the big influence of Art Deco style on this rug. I am assuming that this rug was made in actually this was given to the lady in 1910. So most probably this is the newest rug in the collection. Let's look at the arches now. The arches on Victoria's and Timurian's rugs are pointed or have triangular stair-shaped design specific to Ladic group of rugs. The arch of Sarkis's rug is designed with circles. Sarkis's rug's arch is kind of like, scallops, kind of scallop designs. which is similar to some arch designs in miniature painting from the school of Basburakan. As for the arch structure, there are various similarities between the burial, this is called burial, by Markare, that's 14th century, and the Arch of Sarkis's rock are very similar. And both have arches composed with half circles. The chandeliers are hanging from the arches on both cases. Ceilings and the upper two corners above the arches are filled with floral decorations. We're talking about these decorations. Instead of columns, the painter used the body, instead of columns, the painter in this case used the body of the shapes of the two evangelists, and body of Christ is at the center, where on the carpet we see the flowers. These flowers sometimes symbolize Christ, sometimes symbolize Mary, the mother, or sometimes both of them, depending what kind of flowers they put in there. But I kind of stumbled on this design and realized that this is not the only design that has this kind of structure. And you can assume that this was like a canon for miniature painting and rugs to be designed this way. The base is the same if you look at it. Now, the Eskigens's rug arch is kind of stretched, doesn't look like any of them. Stretched floral decoration that is similar to Muslim arches. If you look at this, you would think that, oh, this is like Muslim arch, nothing else. However, such arch compositions are extant in Armenian miniature painting as well. And I was able to find a lot of them having this kind of unusual shapes of arches in Horans. So that was really not unusual in Armenian painting. Now it's difficult to say in which direction that influence went, but the truth is that these arches exist in Armenian miniature painting of 13th and 14th centuries, and even after. Okay, when I looked at the designs of this rug, like the flowers and all decorations, let's go back to this again. As you can see, the arch is kind of unusual. The columns are kind of pushed aside, and then there is a chandelier hanging in the middle, and frames are missing completely. Instead, there are big, huge tree of lights on both sides of the rug that are sitting on this pedestal, and at the bottom there are these unusual hybrid animals facing each other, and the top there is this kind of architectural structure that we're going to talk about a little bit later. Actually, I put this embroidery from Konya region as an example to show the similarity of these designs that was in kind of common in embroidery arts that was used in this rug. One, when you look at this rug, you will think that it's a European some sort of design, but when you look carefully, you can see the base of that arch rugs, and then also the designs also are influenced by, say, Anatolian designs of textile design. It's so interesting how this Art Deco style, which was kind of like a hybrid art, or they said art without roots. During this time, artists simply would take anything from any culture that they visually liked and put together into a design that was fashionable then. So that's what happened with this rug. Now, in all four rugs next to the arches, the top right and left corners are decorated with floral or stylized floral designs. The Timurian's rug design is highly stylized, whereas the Sarkis's and Eskigens's rug flowers are more realistic. The Victoria's rug, in this case, occupies an intermediate position. It is neither stylized nor close to being realistic. So the arch fields, besides escutcheon, rug are surrounded with secondary narrow frame and lines. Sarkis's and Victoria's rug trims are full of repetitive small flowers, and Timurian's is full of stylized curvilinear decorations. As you can see here, Timurian's rug doesn't have that many frames. Instead, it has like square shaped or cross-spaced flowers, one big huge frame and a couple of tertiary kind of frames on the sides. But meanwhile, Sarkis's rug is full of frames. There is a primary frame and then secondary frames and tertiary frames, altogether like 4 or 5 frames. By the way, I have to mention that number of frames actually meant the price of the design, because then the design became more complicated and it was more difficult to weave. And meanwhile, when the design is much simpler, it's much easier to weave. The escutcheon rug's arch field, as if opposite to the tradition, is surrounded with only one much simpler design. There is no frames in here. The Victorian Sarkis's rugs, as you can see again, this is Timurian's rug and then escutcheon rugs. The Victoria's and Sarkis's rugs' main frames in their design motifs are similar. They present alternation of 2 floral shield motif lines. Every flower shield is scooped with flexible leaves. When you look at these designs, it's so interesting how these designs are designed on these rugs. You see the flower shields, cartridges here, and then you can see that the leaves are kind of facing to each other. On some other cases, those shields can be kind of leaves would be looking away from each other. Eventually, in some other leaves, you can see the designs. You can see twisted leaf design. The arch field besides escutcheon rugs are surrounded with secondary narrow frame trims. Sarkis's and Victoria's rugs trims are full of repetitive small flowers, and the Timurian's is full of stylized curvilinear decoration. In between the arch decoration and the main decorative frame, Victoria's and Timurian's rugs have 2 secondary frames each. Sarkis is surrounded with 3 narrow and much wider frames. The escutcheon's rug arch field, as if opposite of tradition, is surrounded with those much wider frame, or with the main frame only, and the secondary frames are absent. Now, sometimes the flower shields are connecting with S-like curvilinear motifs. The Timurian's rug follows the same tradition. Only instead of wavy and curvy decoration is replaced with square-shaped decorations, and the decorative base of the flower shields are presented with stressed cross-like geometrical floral motifs. In this sense, Timurian's rug presents a beautiful balance of floral and geometrical motifs. The escutcheon rug's only white decorative frame also has an S shape. It's like curved floral decorative motifs. However, again, far from tradition, shield-shaped floral cartridges here are replaced by flowing and continuous branches. The flowers on branches are alternating by aiming up and down and forming again S-shaped decorations. The influence of the West is obvious here, definitely, when we talk about escutcheon's design here. From the comparison of decorative structures, it is possible to make an assumption that Sarkis and Victoria's rugs are similar. Sarkis's rug in color solutions is much closer to Armenian Christian symbolic traditions. The arch field is red, the symbol of Christ's blood, as symbol of Christ's blood, and Timurian's rug is much simpler with structural peculiarities. However, it is characteristics, it is possibly closer to the floral designs of Armenian rugs with cross-based motifs and are more geometrical. The arch of this rug, with its simplicity and reminiscent of the decorations of the rugs made in 14th to 16th centuries. The trim motifs surrounding the arch are floral geometrical point decorations that are common in Armenian rugs and pile-less carpets, kilims. The presence of the line of lilies and narrow-like designs in this rug found on the base of lilies in the rectangular frame on each facade is also specific and narrative to Kesarian rugs. We're talking about these designs. Okay, so we're talking about the lilies and then this type of designs on this rug. It is possible that the rug is older than and well made, that is presented in his office and in a very visible place. He doesn't mention about importance or meaning of these similar rugs. I have to tell you that Timurian left this big memoir about his life, and that is still kept in Nazilli Elmasyan's house. And he, in very great detail, explained everything, but he didn't say anything about these rugs, especially this one that is hanging in his New York office. But you can tell that this rug was very important to him. He was an educated person and a very good specialist, rug specialist. He was a dealer of vintage rugs. He knew exactly what was what, and he chose to hang this rug in his office in a very honorable place. You can tell that this rug was, first of all, worshipped and also had a very nice monetary value, most probably. And that's why he chose this design for his office. And then, as I mentioned before, this rug doesn't have that many frames, though, like secondary, tertiary, couple of frames, but one big, huge frame surrounding the arch field. Eskijan rug, in sense of decorative structures, is subjected to noticeable changes. Obviously, Eskijan's rug is the most changed one, which is right next to the arch and surrounded with secondary narrow and simple floor frame. And I talked about the tree of life on the sides of the arch, and I talked about all these unusual images that are on this rug. If you carefully look in this part of this rug, there is these architectural hybrid structures with lots of arches and chandeliers hanging from those arches, 6 on each other side of the design. Most probably has a 12 symbology of 12. And then on the second row also there's some other architectural structures. This is really influence of the Art Deco style that you can see. As was mentioned before, all these rugs, and I'm assuming Timurian's rug also, because unfortunately we don't have we didn't have a chance to see it in a real life. But all the rugs are made out of silk. The warp of the rugs are silk also, and that's why these old structures are so soft and flexible. You can fold them into a small like piece. For instance, I played with Victoria's rug, and you can fold it into a small like piece like that, but the rug is pretty big. Sarkis's rug I definitely have seen by myself, but it was hanging on the wall as a Skijan rug, so I didn't touch them that much. In the design of rugs from the end of the 19th century, judging from these four rugs, it is safe to say that the canonic structure of the silk Gate of Paradise rugs had triangular stairs shape or horseshoe shape arches. These are luxurious, they have luxurious chandeliers hanging from those arches in different shapes and designs. On upper arch corners, all rugs have floral stylized designs. All of them have rectangular, narrow or wide frames above, filled with floral designs. All of them have primary frames around the arches that are decorated with, on the older samples, with cartridges, and on the new samples with twisted floral motifs. On the new samples, the secondary or tertiary frames were eliminated. Meanwhile, on the old ones, sometimes there are like 3, sometimes 5 frames. In the sense of color, all rugs, as in miniature painting, had basic colors: red, blue, brown, ochre, etc. Meanwhile, in the color design of the new rugs, the most obvious colors were light yellow, brick or ochre colors, most appropriate for European taste, or the colors common in the Art Deco style. That was the color change of the rugs. The arch-shaped rugs, with their unique decorative structure, had important religious worshipping essence and were valued by people who created and used them. The Armenian cross stones, with their stylistic decorative structures, are a connecting link between the famous arch decorations in miniature painting, arts, and arch-shaped rugs, decorative structures. Most of the cross stones had worshipping meaning and essence, related with ideology of God's Son's crucifixion and salvation for the redemption of humanity. In this regard, we can assume that the arch-shaped carpets, as the product created by the same culture, had the same belief value for the creator national group or ethnic group, in this case, people in Kesaria or in surrounding regions that belong to the same ethnic culture. All above mentioned circumstances, reasons, prove that the fact that the tradition of arch form rugs in Kesaria region has its roots in the early Middle Ages and had developed throughout the Middle Ages until the end of the 19th century, and during the second half of the 19th century, Gate of Paradise or arch form rug making and design tradition was stable in Kesaria region, with some modern influences at the beginning of the 20th century. Pretty much when we talk about designs and changes, Gonsorn already or some other researchers stated that these carpets, rugs, this design, arch-shaped designs, were belonging to the Christian nation. In this case, we are talking about the ethnic group in Konya, Anatolia region, Cappadocia region, sorry. But the interesting thing was how that development changes into the 20th century, into the Art Deco style. Finally, we can assume that this type of rugs, with their structure and color design and symbology, are the presenters of God's message and also church's presence in home. One thing that we also should definitely notice that these rugs never were put on the floor, never stepped on it. Even in nowadays, I don't think that any. I have visited a few Kesarian families in Los Angeles, and if the rugs were hanging, I mean, they were there, they would be hanging on the wall. I never saw any rug on the floor. And in Timurian's photo, actually, on the floor there is a rug, another rug that is on the floor, but it's not arch-shaped. That's a different rug that is in there. As cross stones, these rugs also had worshipping value. That's why they have that presence of God or church in the house. And that's why they were worshipped. Actually, I got an email message from Telfeyan family member, Roland Telfeyan, who is from Karapet's side of the family, and he was telling me, yeah, we have lots of rugs like that from 19th century, and I'm sure they're kept in with big reverence because they even now, they long have forgotten the symbology or importance of these rugs, but I'm sure these rugs are, again, kept in great care in those families. And pretty much that's how much I wanted to share with you today.
Thank you, Sophie. Any questions?
Origin of prayer rugs, Armenian or not?
Pretty much with this lecture, that's what I was after, to clarify the source of these rugs. And according to my research, I believe that the source of the arch rugs are Armenian, and they were borrowed by Muslim culture and made into small prayer rugs to use in the, when they prayed. That's why I was saying that that tradition that was kept in the family, and Tina actually shared that story with me, when, let's say, Turkish people came to Telfeyan factory to order prayer rugs for them, they didn't choose any specific design because it was symbolic for their culture, but they chose something that they simply liked. And they said, just give me like green color because that's color of Muhammad. That's all they knew. And one thing that I have to mention, actually, all these stories in Moses' side of the family were kept by Shaine and transferred to Vicky, and Vicky is here. I'm sorry, I didn't notice Vicky. Vicky, can you wave to everybody, please? So this is Vicky Demirci. She's Vicky's granddaughter, and actually now the storyteller is Tina. So according to those stories, Turkish people will come and order these prayer rugs for their use, and they just chose something that they liked. Something appealed to them. But these rugs are connected with all other different art forms in the Armenian culture, like miniature painting, cross-stones, church architecture and everything, goldsmiths too. And also one more thing, these arch designs are very much similar to the books that Ashak Alpoyacan presents in his History of Kesaria book. I mean, these designs are exactly the same. They were like, very much established in the culture. Also, the Church of Grigor Lusavoric in Kesaria also has very exact design, like arch shapes and everything, exactly like these rugs. So yes, I would say they're Armenian designs.
Any other questions?
I'm just noticing on this in this carpet that there are, it looks like to me, some Armenian letters, like K, I think.
There's no letters on this rug.
There are no letters on this rug. Maybe you can kind of from the
if you come downstairs,
curvilinear design. Yeah, actually the rug is downstairs. When you go downstairs, please take a look. You can take a close look. I was surprised that how come I didn't notice that there was letters on this rug.
You mentioned about the triple arch motif that was also found in the Armenian manuscripts.
Yes.
Is this motif also found in the Khachkars, to your knowledge?
That's a very good question. Actually, in Khachkars, you can see the way that, obviously you can see on churches. Every church facade is like that. The middle arch, and then lots of churches in Armenian culture are structured in three arch decoration. On the Khachkars, most probably I can remember the columns, but not the secondary arches in there. That's why we're saying that the entrance of this type of three arch designs are like church designs, and they are like entrance to paradise.
We do have a Khachkar outside, and I think it has
I
similarities.
don't remember that kind of khachkar, honestly, because most probably because khachkars are so narrow, they, they couldn't put, and then the khachkars have a little bit different symbology also. I don't remember that kind of khachkar, if there is that kind of khachkar. Yes?
All throughout your lecture, you referred to those as arches. Have you considered looking at them as altars?
Could be altars too.
Excuse me, especially the column or the ones that you're considering, the three arches. It's strictly, have you considered looking at them as the tri-altars of the Armenian Church? Just a question.
Actually, I didn't understand the question clearly. Can you repeat, please?
Khoran J, Khoran.
Yes.
Microphone to Iran, Maggie. Change your microphone to Iran.
Sorry.
Let me repeat that.
Please.
You kept referring to those patterns as arches. Have you looked at this pattern from a different angle and looking at them as tri-altars, in Armenian, Yera Khoran?
Are you?
I'm just asking the difference.
No, I didn't look at them as altars.
Okay.
I looked at them as a church entrance.
Have you
design.
considered them as, did you consider that option?
Maybe that's possible. I never thought about that.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Most probably that's a possibility, but to me, design-wise, when I'm looking at them, that's the only thing I see. It's a church entrance. Go ahead.
I was in another lecture. They had this Armenian little kids or orphans made a rug for the lighthouse. Have these people done anything like that? Any rugs went to some famous people or country?
The thing is that the unfortunate thing is I don't know if I was kind of like I was reading about this orphan rug that is coming from the same region that was donated to Metropolitan Museum of Art or something. Anywhere these rugs will go, they would interpret it as Ladik Turkish rug. Right now, I'm telling you, like if you go to different sites like Metropolitan Museum, Britannica, or anywhere you look, these rugs are called Turkish rugs. And if they're even coming from the orphans, Armenian orphans, they would say that it was just simply a copy of a Turkish prayer rug. So the unfortunate thing is that these rugs are always get that same interpretation, that wrong interpretation. And hopefully writing about this or publicizing about this might help to change this thinking, that opinion, that wrong opinion that is established based on, that type of, let's say, prayer rug that Turks use. And because the publication of those rugs were so much from Turkish side, right now we have to actually prove that no, these are not Turkish, these are Armenian rugs. And that's what's happening, unfortunately.
Thank you very much, Sophie. And we do have a reception downstairs, and our next event is on February 18, and it's about Armin Wagner, and it's about not his life, but Misa Keleşan, the investigative researcher. He has uncovered letters that he had correspondence with with a German lady in Lebanon, and he will be talking about it. So thank you very much.
By the way, this was my first experience of the reading lecture when I'm doing like PowerPoint and looking at my lecture. So I kind of like I was reading again a couple of times. I apologize for that. I'm getting experience in doing this.
Thank you, Sophie.
Sure.
I'm going to run downstairs and
Okay.
find out. Dami.
Ashok, do you want to come and help me? What is the question? Great. Hey, look, you're here. How are you? Noticed that you guys are sitting here. I'm like, yeah, they're not here. Okay.
No.
Ashok, correct the computer, please. So, how are you doing?
I'm good. You know what? I'm going to ask you something, right? So when we talked about looking at the rug and how it works with the structure of the church, with the columns, is there any structure in the Muslim mosque that represents the way those rugs look to you? Would somebody who's Muslim say this represents the structure of our mosque? Or no? So in that respect, it makes it very clear that it's an Armenian.
I understand what you're saying. So the thing is that Muslim culture is based on Christianity, Judaic culture. So even in the same Quran it says that this lamp is hanging from the niche of the arch and blah blah blah. Because these cultures are intertwined. But the thing is that Armenian churches have those kind of points shapes. Muslims don't.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So that is itself kind of.
They have the columns though. They have different type of arches.
They do.
Have arches too because they're I think that their source is in Mesopotamia also. They're based on that comes from Judaic tradition. İran Yegaz
Muslims didn't take that structure on. That means it's more evident that it's Armenian.
But it is so Armenian.
Yeah.
The mosques are not like that.
No, that's what
They're not. That's why.
That's your strength in
Yeah.
that argument.
Yeah, and actually that strength belongs to that belongs to Gonzo.
Yeah.
He first said that this is like this. What I'm saying I'm agreeing with him.
Yeah.
And I'm saying
He's
that
showing you
this
based
is
on what
how
I
that
see.
moves and how that goes into the 20th century. Even the arch is changing.
Yeah, and I was actually going to ask you about that moment you discovered the connection between the manuscripts and the rug. I wrote that manuscript was so evident.
That's what I'm saying.
Here, the two apostles or whatever are here. I'm like,
I got goosebumps when I found
I
it.
was total goosebumps.
Yeah. Can you see, like, and also another strength in this argument is that when we're saying that this type of images are coming from the 13th century, early Middle Ages, in those times there was no like Muslim art or church building or whatever. They started doing that. Obviously, Muslim religion started in the 6th century. But the thing is that they were taking their baby steps. There was no organized and structured art. Meanwhile, in Armenian culture, that art already was there.
It already existed. So a lot of the Islamic art too, is without faces, right? It's all symbols.
That's right.
And so they even see that in their art, in the rug, from the lilies and the, today's we repeat a lot of stories, but anyway, one of the scientists when we say and the flower was much older, like he was born in the 1800s or like in his friend, his younger sister so he's like, and then he made her look
Let's
take the elevator. Could I help you with something?
I guess I'm okay.
You're okay? All right.
Take my bag. Is this mine? Okay. Ashok, look enough. Ashok, can you take the computer so I can say hi to
coconut. I miss Mickey coconut. Saya ingin kenapa Mickey coconut. Ini cerita saya balik. Saya marah matematikanya. Jadi balik. Saya ingin kenapa Mickey coconut. Kamu juga sudah